Welcome to our new special episode of our conversations about the cosmos. Today with a special guest, Chris Hadfield. Welcome.
It's my pleasure to be joining you both. Thank you very much.
And this episode is now about pushing the envelope, about pushing the limits of adventure, of our presence in space, of our knowledge, and of sharing this knowledge with the general public.
So, just a very quick question. Have you seen the new Top Gun movie?
I have.
Do you miss being a test pilot?
And I think, I flew F-18s in combat. I was a combat fighter pilot during the Cold War. And then I flew F-18s in amongst a lot of other airplanes, about 100 different types of airplanes, as a test pilot with both the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy. And then I flew a lot of airplanes with NASA as well. So yeah, I watched the new Top Gun movie with a lot of interest, and it is so much better than the original Top Gun. And I think it's the best flying movie I've ever seen. They really worked hard to make it as real as they could. I was squirming in my seat the whole time just because it felt so evocative and memorable and plausible. It was a lot of fun.
Being a test pilot is risky, and so is being an astronaut. From your perspective, is the risk justified by scientific progress, or is it mostly driven by our innate drive for exploration?
Everything worth doing in life has risk. You guys probably know how to ride a bicycle. I mean, you get going fast on a bicycle, there's risk. And when you're first learning, one of my kids, when he was learning to ride a bike, he fell off and broke both front teeth. Just something as straightforward and human as common as riding a bicycle has risk, but the reward is so cool. Suddenly you can go so much faster and so much easier and feel the wind blowing by your head and get places quickly. And so people, even though there's risk, they decide this is something I want to do. And so then they get someone to teach them, and then they practice and learn the skill until they're good at it. And then they go do that thing. Space flight is exactly the same. It's just a more complicated bicycle. That's all. And I think trying to understand the rest of everything and trying to understand our own planet from an external view, those are worth taking a risk for. And so, yeah, I decided when I was 9 years old that, okay, just like riding a bike, this is one of the things that's worth taking a risk for. And now my job is not to be afraid or to hide or to pretend or to cross my fingers. My job is to learn how to ride this bicycle, change who I am, modify my own skills so that now I can do this thing that has higher risk, but do it well enough, that it doesn't break my teeth off or kill me.
Okay, so now about different type of risky situation. What is your stance on Moon and Mars colonization? Because maybe we should be more careful, for example, to avoid contamination of those planet or a moon, or should we be actually more daring to drive the progress forward?
We've been to the moon with robots and with people multiple times, and there is no reason to think there's life or ever has been life on the moon. We are very much confident that the moon is completely sterile. So you don't need to worry about contaminating the moon, at least from a life point of view. Mars, though, Mars 4 billion years ago was a lot like Earth. It had oceans, it had a thick atmosphere, it had geothermal heat. And so at the same time that life first developed on Earth, Mars was really similar. So it's not unreasonable to think that life may have developed on Mars as well. And life has been on Earth uninterrupted for 4 billion years. And, we're pretty complicated and fragile life, but a lot of life is almost unkillable. So tough, the extremophiles. And so there may be that type of life still on Mars, below the rock or, in the water that the almost endless amount of water that exists underneath the surface. So yeah, we really have to be careful to protect life on Mars as we explore it. But we've already settled Mars. It's just, we've entirely settled it with robots so far. There's multiple robots that have landed and worked. Some of them have died. Some of them are still working. So as far as we know, it's the only planet that's entirely inhabited by robots right now. But eventually, and we completely sterilize those exploration and research robots before they go. So we're not like bringing some sort of microbe that NASA even has a interplanetary protection officer. That's their job to make sure that we're doing that right. But almost always, when people are living in some sort of comfortable environment and someone says, hey, let's change stuff or let's do something new, all the old folks go, oh, we can't do anything new. Let's be careful. And boy, gosh, things might not be good. And we need to slow down and take a step back. And we need both those voices. We need the wisdom of age, but we also need the impetus and drive and aggressive, energetic nature of youth. And when you're in exploration, you're kind of both. And you really have to try and be responsible. But what's happening, because the cost of launch has dropped so dramatically in the last 10 years, is space is accessible to so many more people now than it's ever been. So that is opening up, not just orbiting the world, but the moon and eventually Mars. And so, yeah, it's, we need to think about it. But so far, we're doing it pretty well.
With Mars sample return missions in maybe 10 years, do you expect life to be found there, something microscopic, or you wouldn't bet on this?
Right while we're sitting here, there is this, it's about the size of a smart car, a little bigger than that is called, Perseverance. It's a big robot that's driving around on Mars. And on the end of it, it's also got a little helicopter, a little drone, like just a little remote control thing that can fly around and scout for good places to look. That's called Ingenuity. But Perseverance, this great big robot, is driving around an old river delta. Because when water's flowing down a river and then suddenly the river spreads, as the water slows down, a lot of sediment falls out of it. And a lot of the stuff that falls out of it is life, little tiny bits of stuff. And they go to the bottom and they stick in the mud, and then more mud is laid on top of them, and that leaves fossils. And so on Earth, if you look and find an ancient riverbed, you're always going to find fossils, petrified life. And so it's a great place to look on Mars for petrified life. So right now, Perseverance is drilling. It's a drill, like that big around, and it's hollow in the middle. So it drills down into the rock and then pulls out a little core sample. And I'm Canadian. I'm proud because that little drill is made here in Canada. And then it's putting those in like little jars and setting them aside. So they're ready to come back for us to look at. But it's pretty hard getting something from the surface of Mars back to a laboratory on Earth. So it's going to be a while before our technology is good enough. We can send a rocket there, land, and then blast off of Mars, get to orbit, and then cover the, hundreds of millions of kilometers in between the two planets, and then has to re-enter back into the Earth's atmosphere and land somewhere where we can then get those little samples, put them under a microscope, and see if we can find any fossils. So it sounds incredibly complicated, but it's brand new and it's the best we've figured out. Eventually, maybe while we're still alive, we can just send a geologist or an archaeologist or a paleontologist or some sort of ologist to Mars, and they can just go look. But for now, the best we can do is robots, and we're doing the best we can with what we figured out so far, and we just might find life that way.
Another question about exploration at the extremes. If you had a chance for a one-way trip to explore Titan or Enceladus, which are really exotic moons of Saturn's, or another really unique world, I didn't say Mars on purpose, would you take the opportunity?
I think you said one-way trip. We're all on a one-way. We're all on a one-way trip. I mean, nobody here gets out alive, right? So you need to get over that part. And is it really that important where you are in the last day of your life? It's your life that matters, the whole structure of your life, not just, where I was on the day that it ended. So you kind of need to think about what's important to you. And what do you want to accomplish? Well, you have these, I don't know how many days you get, 30,000 days maybe? What are you going to do with your 30,000 days? And you could say the entire purpose of my 30,000 days is to get another 600 days on the end. But that seems kind of like a sadness, you know, especially if those last couple of years is right at the end of your life when you're kind of debilitated and you can't do some of the stuff you might have been able to do when you were younger. So it's a risk-benefit trade-off. What do you value? What do you want to do? But I think you asked your question incorrectly. Astronauts don't just go for rides and show up someplace. We help invent spaceflight. I helped design the space shuttle cockpit. I helped design procedures in the Russian launch vehicle, the Soyuz. I helped build 2 different space stations. And you're a huge part of space exploration. And most of it happens before you launch. And that's the really fun part. You're right on the cutting edge with a group of great people trying to solve problems so that then you can go do something that nobody's ever done before. And that's hugely exciting. And if someone said to me, hey, we are going to go to whatever, Mars, in 10 years, are you willing to be part of the team that's going to work on it every single day for the next 10 years? And to me, that would be great fun, especially if you got to go to Mars at the end of it. Why not? And I mean, if I'm going to never see my family again, I need to think about that, of course. You'd want to bring your family with you if you're going to go someplace, forever. But that's not the only thing to think about. And everyone gets all hung up on a one-way trip. I mean, you really need to balance out your whole life. And what makes you feel happy? What makes you feel worthwhile? What gives you satisfaction and pride in yourself? What do you look forward to every single day? And try and fill your life with as much of that as possible on everybody's one-way trip.
So maybe related to that question, you spent years preparing for the flight on the ISS, working hard every day. Then you went to space and had a unique experience, which most of us even cannot begin to grasp. Then you returned home. How did you cope with the normal life after that?
So I served as an astronaut for 21 years and flew in space 3 times. So that's 7 years of preparation for each flight. But it's not just preparation for flight. It's supporting all the other astronauts. It's working in mission control. It's designing procedures. It's teaching robotics. I was NASA's director of operations in Russia for a couple of years. It's learning to speak Russian so you can fly a Russian spaceship. It's a million things. And I flew in space 3 times. So that is my normal life, and it's what I sort of view it as, it's kind of like it just built a higher and higher platform underneath me of understanding and skill and capability and experience so that you can see further. You can do more stuff. You have more opportunity as a result of it. And you also have a huge richness of personal experience. And so the question maybe flips back to the two of you. Once you have had well over 2 decades of that experience, what do you do then? And I just thought, hey, other people paid for this. The Canadian taxpayer paid for me to go. I have an enormous debt to make sure that I don't squander this experience. I don't just, keep it to myself. So that's why I teach at university. It's why I use Skype like we're talking. I use it to tie into classrooms all the time, all around the world. It's why I do lecture tours all around the world. It's why I wrote a book. I've actually written 4 books, but my first one was kind of the really important ideas that have come from my life so far. And it's called literally An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. It's not a biography. That's what it is. It's an astronaut's guide to life on Earth. And I've made a BBC TV series. I made a National Geographic series about our world. I perform music. We're doing a concert in Texas here very shortly. I just do everything. And I even wrote, a thriller fiction book, The Apollo Murders, because that's another way to tell the story. And it's an international bestseller. It's in 15 languages, and it's being made into a TV series. But it's another way to try and share what is a really rare human experience. And by using fiction, you can really sort of bring it to life and get everybody's visceral reaction. But so it's not like I was sort of beebling along with a boring life. Whoa, we flew in space and now everything else is boring. It is just a big part of the larger big part of my whole life. And it's very much a part of who I am and who I'm going to be for the remainder of my life.
So we have seen the first long-awaited images from the James Webb Space Telescope, and they prove that the telescope is not only great for science, but also for science outreach. It brings the joy of exploring the universe to everyone. And during your ISS missions, which of your contributions do you believe had more significant impact? Your scientific research or your science outreach?
Well, the space station, we launched the first piece in 1998. And we've had crews on there since 2000. So for the last 22 years, we've had people doing the experiments on board. And I was there during Expedition 34, 35. So the Rocky movies with Sylvester Stallone? I was like Rocky 34 and Rocky 35, and now we're up to Rocky 62 or 63. So as an individual, my scientific contributions, they're proportionately pretty small. Right? They're important and valid. And we had some really serious problems. We had to do an emergency spacewalk to save the entire space station. And we executed that properly. So I don't want to belittle the operational and scientific result of what we did. But I mean, I did a thing with students where we had a live event with 700,000 students simultaneously. And if you can influence 700,000 young people's perception of what's possible, so they make different choices with their lives. In Ireland, after my flight, they discussed it in the Irish Parliament. There was a measurable change in the number of kids that went into science and math the next year, directly as a result of the outreach, as you call it, influence that I had on their lives. And so if you can help other people see possibilities differently enough that they change their decision-making and give themselves more skills, what's more significant than that? Especially if you can do it for many hundreds of thousands of people. So yeah, I think it's all significant. And I worked super hard at it. And I'm still am. And that's why I'm talking to you. And I'm very pleased with the results.
So hopefully this podcast will also cause a little spike in the STEM applications.
Yes, I hope
we'll
so.
have some students as a result of this. So thank you for your time, and to our listeners, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Great, and a joy to speak to all of your listeners as well. We're just about to go over 8 billion of us in November. 8 billion of us, and we got some big problems to solve here on this earth. Some of them are just interpersonal, but most of them are technical. How do we feed everybody? How do we provide power? How do we not pollute our oceans and our atmosphere? And in order to do those things, we need to inspire people. We need to enable people. We need to work together. We've got to overcome the stupid stuff that we do and still somehow do the really smart things. And we can do it. We've been doing it for many thousands of years, but it's not getting any easier. And so I'm really pleased if any of your viewers can think about that and how, what pisses them off the most and what do they want to do in their own life to try and take some sort of risk to do the things that are really important to them. Thanks for having me in, guys.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Be well. You too.